The rain was so violent that Jonah Callaway almost never saw the woman standing beside the road, and if he had driven another 100 yards, a mother and her 4-month-old baby might have disappeared into the Montana darkness forever. Montana Territory, 1886. The October storm had turned the valley road into a river of mud, and Jonah was determined to reach his ranch before nightfall. His horse, August, struggled through the deep tracks while cold rains struck Jonah's coat like handfuls of stones. Then something moved near the roadside. Jonah pulled the reins hard. At first he thought it was a broken fence post. Then the figure turned. It was a woman, soaked from head to toe, holding a tiny bundle beneath a grey blanket. Jonah climbed down from the wagon. "Ma'am, you can't stay out here." The woman lifted her tired face. She looked young, frightened, and completely exhausted, but there was something guarded in her eyes. "I'm all right," she answered. Jonah glanced at her muddy boots and then at the blanket. It moved slightly. "That your child?" She nodded. "My daughter." He looked toward the dark road. "My ranch is 2 miles south. You can come with me." The woman hesitated. "You don't know me." "No," Jonah replied, "but I know you're standing in freezing rain with a baby." For a moment neither spoke. Then she looked down at her daughter and finally whispered, "Could we sleep in your barn?" Jonah's expression softened. "You and that little girl are not sleeping in my barn." He held out his hand. "You'll have the spare room." The woman stared at his hand as though kindness had become something unfamiliar. Then she placed hers in it. "My name is Mave," she said. "Jonah Callaway." He helped her into the wagon and covered the baby with his own dry coat. As they rode toward the ranch, Mave kept watching him, perhaps waiting for the questions she knew would come. None did. Jonah simply drove. His ranch house stood alone beneath the darkening sky, sturdy but strangely quiet. 3 years earlier, Jonah's wife had died, leaving him with a house that was maintained perfectly but rarely felt lived in. Mave noticed the empty chair near the fireplace and the unused wooden cradle pushed against the wall. She said nothing. Jonah showed her the spare bedroom. Mave placed her daughter Clara on the bed and carefully removed the wet blanket. The baby was tired but alert. Jonah went to the kitchen and began preparing supper. "You should rest," he said. Mave appeared in the doorway carrying Clara. "Can I help?" "It's only soup." Mave gave a faint smile. "Then I can watch the bread." For the first time that evening, Jonah almost smiled. They worked together without asking questions. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, a lonely rancher, a frightened mother, and a baby shared their first warm meal together. And neither Jonah nor Mave knew that this unexpected night would quietly change all 3 of their lives. By midnight, the storm had weakened, but another danger had entered Jonah Callaway's quiet ranch house. Mave woke suddenly when she felt heat against her arm. Clara was burning with fever. Mave sat upright and placed her hand against the baby's forehead. Her heart tightened. She had learned enough from an old midwife to know what to watch for, but fear still settled heavily inside her chest. She carried Clara into the kitchen and began heating water. The floor creaked behind her. Jonah appeared in the doorway, still wearing the clothes he had slept in. "What happened?" he asked. "She has a fever." Jonah immediately took the pot from her hands. "Tell me what you need." "Hot water, clean cloths, and keep the fire going." He did not question her. He simply worked. Soon they were sitting beside Clara together, changing cool cloths and watching the baby breathe. Jonah stayed in the chair near the bed, while Mave held her daughter against her chest. "You should sleep," he whispered. "I can't." "Then I'll stay awake too." Mave looked at him. "Why?" Jonah looked at Clara for a long moment. "Because she's here." It was such a simple answer that Mave did not know what to say. Hours passed. The fire slowly burned lower. Jonah added wood whenever needed. Mave kept nursing Clara and speaking softly to her. Near dawn, the baby's fever finally began to fall. Mave closed her eyes with relief. When she looked across the room, Jonah was still sitting there. "Thank you," she whispered. "My father taught me something," Jonah said. "If you see someone in trouble, you stop. You don't ask what they did to deserve help." Mave lowered her eyes. Not many people live by that anymore. Maybe they should. Clara finally slept peacefully. Jonah rose quietly and left the room. Mave watched him go and suddenly understood something about the empty cradle she had seen. His kindness was not casual. It came from somewhere painful. Morning arrived grey and cold. When Mave entered the kitchen, Jonah was already outside feeding the horses. She opened his pantry and began making breakfast. She found flour, lard, dried apples, and coffee. Soon, the smell of warm biscuits filled the house. Jonah returned and stopped at the doorway. "Clara?" he asked before anything else. "The fever broke," Mave replied. His shoulders relaxed. They ate together in comfortable silence. The road outside was slowly drying. Jonah glanced toward it. "By noon, you could travel." Mave looked down at her coffee. "Clara isn't ready." "Then you won't travel." She looked up. "You mean we can stay?" Jonah nodded. "Until she's strong enough." Mave felt something unfamiliar, relief without fear. Over the next several days, their lives began fitting together naturally. Jonah worked the ranch. Mave cared for Clara and brought order to the house. She reorganized his pantry, repaired a torn shirt, and made meals from supplies he had forgotten existed. Jonah said little, but he noticed everything. And slowly, the empty ranch began to feel different. For the first time in 3 years, someone was waiting for Jonah to come home. The first sign that Jonah's heart was changing came in the smallest way. He returned from town one cold afternoon, carrying a tiny knitted cap. He placed it quietly on the table beside Mave. She looked at the cap, then at him. "For Clara?" "Her ears get cold," he answered, as though that explained everything. Mave touched the soft wool with her fingers. "You didn't have to buy this." Jonah shrugged. "I wanted to." That night, Mave placed the cap on Clara's head. Jonah stood near the fireplace watching them, and for a moment the ranch felt less like a lonely place and more like a home. Days became weeks. The storm passed, but Mave remained because Clara was still too young for the difficult journey ahead. Jonah never pressured her to leave. Instead, he quietly made room for both of them in his life. He built a small wooden shelf for Clara's things. He repaired the cradle that had stood unused for years. One evening, Mave found him sanding it beside the fire. She stood silently in the doorway. "Who was it for?" she finally asked. Jonah stopped working. For a long moment, he stared at the cradle. "My wife and I were expecting a baby," he said. "We lost the child before it was born." His voice remained steady, but Mave could hear the grief underneath it. "After she died, I couldn't bring myself to throw the cradle away." Mave walked closer. "You didn't have to tell me. I know." He looked at Clara sleeping nearby. "But you deserved to understand." Mave reached out and gently touched his arm. "Some things aren't meant to be thrown away," she said. Jonah looked at her. "No, I suppose they aren't." Their eyes remained locked for a moment longer than either expected. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. Inside, Clara made a tiny sound in her sleep. Jonah smiled. "She's going to wake up." Mave smiled back. "She usually does." That became their life. Small moments, quiet kindness, shared work, and a growing affection neither dared name too quickly. Jonah began carrying Clara when Mave needed both hands. Mave started leaving his coffee ready before sunrise. He repaired the loose wheel on her traveling trunk. She began saving the best biscuit for him. Nothing dramatic happened. Love arrived slowly, disguised as ordinary kindness. Then one evening, Mave stood by the door with her packed bag. Clara was finally healthy enough to travel. Jonah saw the bag and went silent. "The road is safe now," Mave said softly. "I know. We can go tomorrow." Jonah looked toward Clara, then back at Mave. "Do you want to?" She hesitated. "I don't know." Jonah stepped closer. "Then don't leave because you think you have to." Tears gathered in Mave's eyes. "What are you asking?" Jonah took her hand. "I'm asking you to stay, not because you need shelter, but because I want you here." Mave looked toward the repaired cradle, then at Clara, then back at the lonely rancher who had stopped for them in the rain. She squeezed his hand. "Then maybe," she whispered, "we finally found the place we were both looking for." And in that quiet Montana house, the woman who had once begged for a place to sleep and the widowed rancher who had forgotten what home felt like began building one together.